This of all things her family understood, and afterward they drew together staunchly around her. It was hard for them in the village. Winnie knew it was, and the knowledge gave her pain, for they were proud and she had shamed them. Still, this side of the affair was not without its benefits, at least for Winnie. Though she was confined to the yard indefinitely and could go nowhere, not even with her mother or her grandmother, the other children wandered by to look at her, to talk to her through the fence. They were impressed by what she had done. She was a figure of romance for them now, where before she had been too neat, too prissy, almost somehow too clean to be a real friend. Winnie sighed and plucked at the grass around her ankles. School would open soon. It wouldn't be so bad. In fact, she thought as her spirits lifted, this year it might be rather nice. And then two things happened. First of all, the toad appeared out of the weeds on her side of the fence, of the road this time. It bounced out of a cover of old dandelion leaves and landed plop just beyond the fence. If she had reached her hand through the bars, she could have touched it, and next, a large brown dog with easy gait and dangling tongue came lapping down the road toward them. He stopped opposite the fence and looked at Winnie with a friendly swish of his tail, and then he saw the toad. At once, he began to bark, his eyes bright. He pranced up, his hind quarters leaping independently from side to side, nose close to the toad, his voice shrill with enthusiasm. "Don't!" cried Winnie, leaping to her feet and flapping her arms. "Go away, dog! Stop that! Go away! Shoo!" The dog paused. He looked up at Winnie's frantic dancing, and then he looked at the toad, who had pressed down close to the dirt, eyes tight shut. It was too much for him. He began to bark again and reached out a long paw. "Oh!" cried Winnie. "Oh, don't do that! Leave my toad alone!" And before she had time to realize what she was doing, she bent, reached through the bars, and snatched the toad up and away from harm, dropping it on the grass inside the fence. A feeling of revulsion swept through her. While the dog whined, pawing uselessly at the fence, she stood rigid, staring at the toad, wiping her hand again and again on the skirt of her dress. Then she remembered the actual feel of the toad, and the revulsion passed. She knelt and touched the skin of its back with its rough and soft. It was rough and soft, both at once, and cool. Winnie stood up and looked at the dog. He was waiting outside the fence, his head on one side, peering at her longingly. "It's my toad," Winnie told him, "so you'd better leave it alone." And then, on an impulse, she turned and ran into the cottage, up to her room, to the bureau drawer, where she had hidden Jessie's bottle, the bottle of water from the spring. In a moment, she was back again. The toad still squatted where she had dropped it. The dog still waited at the fence. Winnie pulled out the cork from the mouth of the bottle, and kneeling, she poured the precious water very slowly and carefully over the toad. The dog watched this operation, and then, yawning, he was suddenly bored. He turned and loped away, back down the road to the village. Winnie picked up the toad and held it for a long time, without the least disgust, in the palm of her hand. It sat calmly, blinking, and the water glistened on its back. The little bottle was empty now. It lay on the grass at Winnie's feet. But if all of it were true, there was more water in the wood. There was plenty more, just in case, when she was 17, if she should decide there was more water in the wood. Winnie smiled, then she stood and put her hand through the fence and set the toad free. "There," she said, "you're safe forever." Epilogue. The sign said, "Welcome to Tree Gap," but it was hard to believe that this was really Tree Gap. The main street hadn't changed so very much, but there were many other streets now, crossing the main street. The road itself was blacktopped. There was a white line painted down its center. May and Tuck, on the seat of the clattering wooden wagon, bumped slowly into Tree Gap behind the fat old horse. They had seen continuous change and were accustomed to it, but here it seemed shocking and sad. "Look," said Tuck. "Look, May. Ain't that where the wood used to be? It's gone. Not a stick or stump left. And her cottage, that's gone too." It was very hard to recognize anything, but the little hill, which had once lain outside the village, was now very much a part of it. They thought they could figure things out. "Yes," said May. "That's where it was, I do believe. Of course, it's been so long since we was here, I can't tell for certain." There was a gas station there now. A young man in greasy coveralls was polishing the windshield of the wide and rusty Hudson automobile. As May and Tuck rolled past, the young man grinned and said to the driver of the Hudson, who lounged at the wheel, "Looky here, in from the county for a big time." And they chuckled together. May and Tuck clattered into the village proper, past a Catholic mixture of houses, houses, which soon gave way to shops and other places of business, a hot dog stand, a dry cleaner, a pharmacy, a 5 and 10, another gas station, a tall white frame building with a pleasant veranda, the Tree Gap Hotel, family dining, easy rates, the post office, beyond that, the jailhouse, but a larger jailhouse now, painted brown with an office for the county clerk. A black and white police car was parked in front with a red glass searchlight on its roof and a radio antenna, like the buggy whip fastened to the windshield. May glanced at the jailhouse, but looked away quickly. See beyond there, she said, pointing. That diner. Let's stop there and get a cup of coffee, all right? All right, said Tuck. Maybe they'll know something. Inside, the diner gleamed with chrome and smelled like linoleum and ketchup. May and Tuck took seats on the rumbling swivel stools at the long counter. The countermen emerged from the kitchen at the rear and sized them up expertly. They looked all right, a little weird maybe, their clothes especially, but honest. He slapped a cardboard menu down in front of them and leaned on the foaming orangeade cooler. You folks from off? He asked. Yep, said Tuck, just passing through. Sure, said the counterman. Say, said Tuck cautiously, fingering the menu, didn't there used to be a wood once down the other side of town? Sure, said the counterman. Had a big electrical storm, though, about 3 years ago now, and thereabouts. Big tree got hit by a lightning split right down the middle. Caught fire and everything. Tore up the ground, too. Had to bulldozer all out. Oh, said Tuck. He and May exchanged glasses. Coffee, please, said May, black, for both of us. Sure, said the counterman. He took the menu away, poured coffee into the thick pottery mugs, and leaned again on the orangeade cooler. Used to be a freshwater spring in that wood, said Tuck boldly, sipping his coffee. Don't know nothing about that, said the counterman. Had to bulldozer all out, like I say. Oh, said Tuck. Afterward, while May was shopping for supplies, Tuck went back through the town on foot, back the way they had come. Out on the little hill. There were houses there now and a feed and grain store, but on the far side of the hill, inside a rambling iron fence, was a cemetery. Tuck's heart quickened. He had noticed the cemetery on the way in. May had seen it too. They had not spoken about it, but both knew it might hold other answers. Tuck straightened his old jacket. He passed through an archway of wrought iron curling cues and paused, squinting at the weedy rows of gravestones. And then, far over to the right, he saw a tall monument, once no doubt imposing, but now tipped slightly sideways. On it was carved one name, Foster. Slowly, Tuck turned his footsteps toward the monument, and saw as he approached that there were other, smaller markers all around it, a family plot. And then his throat closed, for it was there. He had wanted it to be there, but now that he saw it, he was overcome with sadness. He knelt and read the inscription. In loving memory, Winifred Foster Jackson, dear wife, dear mother, 1870 to 1948. So, said Tuck to himself, 2 years. She'd been gone for 2 years. He stood up and looked around embarrassed, trying to clear the lump from his throat, but there was no one to see him. The cemetery was very quiet. In the branches of a willow behind him, a red-winged blackbird chirped. Tuck wiped his eyes hastily. Then he straightened his jacket again and drew up his hand in a brief salute. Good girl, he said aloud. And then he turned and left the cemetery, walking quickly. Later, as he and May rolled out a tree gap, May said softly without looking at him, She's gone? Tuck nodded. She's gone, he answered. There was a long moment of silence between them, and then May said, Poor Jessie. He knowed it, though, said Tuck. At least he knowed she wasn't coming. We all knowed that, long time ago. Just the same, said May. She sighed, and then she sat up a little straighter. Well, where to now, Tuck? No need to come back here no more. That's so, said Tuck. Let's just head out this way. We'll locate something. All right, said May, and then she put a hand on his arm and pointed. Look out for that toad. Tuck had seen it too. He reined in the horse and climbed down from the wagon. The toad was squatting in the middle of the road, quite unconcerned. In the other lane, a pickup truck rattled by, and against the breeze it made, the toad shut its eyes tightly, but it did not move. Tuck waited till the truck had passed, and then he picked up the toad and carried it to the weeds along the road's edge. Darn fool thing must think it's gonna live forever, he said to May, and soon they were rolling on again, leaving Tree Gap behind, and as they went, the tinkling little melody of a music box drifted out behind them and was lost, at last, far down the road. The end.
What?
Wow. That's the end.
That's how it ends?
Yeah, it's
Was there like a part 2 of it?
Yes,
Miss
he
Bowman.
died.
Who died?
You know how
He
Travis
died.
is sick today? You okay? Come on.